So good morning to good afternoon to all of our participants.
The unknown says, our confidence is naive. Compromise. Stick to the tried and tested. Your passion is aggressive, knowing that we are coming for everything, marching forwards in numbers, in ones and zeros. The past has no leverage on us. The present expected us to stand still, but time ticked our presence, with the future inscribing us into history's foundation, calling us by our names, including the clicks in our names and clicking of our fingers. Once not born with silver spoons in their mouths, are now makers of the spoon and benders thereof, came to this earth with answers clenched in fist, unclenching fist to be the answer. Ours is not a race to come first or be first, but to influence and impact us, energy injectors, conductors of creativity, dancers with the rain, proverbs for our posterity, signaling the speed of ideas, implanting innovation, setting standards as a tradition. We are outliers, the avant-garde, belonging to secrets whispered in spaces unseen for fear of our splendor. We are resolutely spewing out stagnation, a slow poison for the norm, perplexing conformity. We're not taking up space only to be muted at the table, not just conduits between what should be and is, not just bodies trading into uncharted public realms, but we are tomorrow's tools, the manifestation of ideals unscripted, leaning on the reassurance of the rising of the sun the next day. Let he without foresight cast the first doubt, whilst we visionaries converge at Urban Festival 2020. Welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Also from our side, welcome at this very session of the Urban Festival, co-organized by a whole range of institutions, of which you may have seen the logos just now with the lovely poem. This is conversation 2 in the urban studies dimension of the Urban Festival, where we have present this afternoon 3 research chairs based at 3 different universities across South Africa, and most importantly, 3 PhD students that will be sharing some of the studies ongoing at the moment in the area of urban innovation, social and environmental sustainability. So I can add that the 3 chairs involved in today's session all work in some way or the other on issues of social and environmental sustainability. So the format of today is as follows. We will have the 3 chairs introducing their chairs to give you a sense of their research agendas and the focus of their work. And thereafter, we will have 1 PhD student from every chair presenting, as I've said earlier, on their PhD themes. So first up, if I may, and perhaps before I put Prof. Hope behind the microphone, I can just also indicate that anybody is at any point welcome to pose any question in the chat line. We will have a Q&A of at least 30 to 35 minutes at the end of this session, but we will also respond in writing to any questions coming through in the Zoom chat line. So Prof. Hope Magadamisha, she actually needs very little introduction for people working in the area of urban studies. She's a recently appointed chair at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, where she's going to work for the next 5 years and even longer on issues of urban inclusivity. Prof. Hope, I'm going to give the mic to you, and immediately after you, I'm going to ask Mr. Sam Madayaise, and I'm apologizing for any wrong pronouncement, addressing us on road transport infrastructure development, a metaphor for urban livability in Minna, Nigeria. Over to you, Prof. Hope.
Thank you very much, Prof, for being our facilitators today. And thank you very much for all the organizers and the invite. we have. As Prof said, I'm currently a study chair for inclusive cities. I will be sharing the website so people they will get to know more of what we are doing. I'll share this on our chat. My understanding of my brief was that I just have to talk a little bit of the introduction of one of my PhD students. Prof. Nell has made it very clear that today is not our days as chair. So I put very little effort in trying to explain what I'm actually doing. But my love affairs with the city started at a very tender age. The age of 13 when I was a teenager. And we had an opportunity to drive to Johannesburg from the rural province of Limpopo. And when I get to Johannesburg, I was very fascinated by seeing the tall buildings and just everything happening so fast. People there everywhere. Now I'm coming from a chilled area, and that was very unique for us. And as we're driving around the cities, we come across a very nice street, and the street was very wide, beautiful lights, nice houses. Everything was functioning. The infrastructure looked tip-top. The kids who were playing in the parks, they look very healthy and well looked after. And at some point, I almost thought maybe they breathe a different air than what the air that I was breathing all this time, which might be the truth because, of course, because of the many factors, including the environment in which they're living in the noise pollution and air pollution and etc. But with the very same bus and this very same trip, we landed into a different street again. And this street this time was a bit different. We stopped for a little bit. And this is the street which kind of make me start thinking. And this street looked like the roads infrastructure was not perfect at all. There were a lot of potholes. The issue of sanitation was an issue. You could see water. There was no sewage. There was no working drainage system. The toilet, of course, there were no toilets. And as you are looking around and walking around, you could see some of the flies in this area. And this is still within the same cities in Johannesburg that we have visited. Now, why am I saying this? This is bringing my next discussion about the dual city that we have. South Africa has the dual cities, and this is where my interest of cities come in. Now, as you can see, and the statistics will tell you that we have over half of population, world population now residing in urban areas, and this is expected to grow in the next coming years, right? But this growth, there's no balance between this growth and, should I say, the growth of the population. So people are coming, but there's no growth in terms of the economic infrastructures and other activities as we know them. And as such, this creates what we call disparities, a huge level of disparities. And statisticians will also tell you that almost every week, about 1 million of people are moving to urban areas or to the cities. Now, and this is where my interest is, and the Sashi chair is also kind of looking at these areas to say, what does this mean if we have so many people keep coming to our areas? What does it mean for urban planners? What does this mean for policymakers? And how do we then respond to this? What do we need to do to able to match up with this? Because this, of course, with no doubt, it results into high level of exclusivity of a certain group of people in our urban areas. And who's supposed to do what and who's not doing what? Oh, these are the areas which I am interrogating a lot in our Sashi chairs. But today among ourselves, I've brought one of my PhD students who will be talking to you about the issues around livability in urban areas. And you see, Samuel is one of the bad guys of our team, because he is the one guy who will say to you, when you are coming up with all the indicators, conceptualizing all the indicators, said, what about sustainability? Can we actually afford that? Can people actually afford that? So those are the type of the questions that he likes asking. And his study in his PhDs is actually looking at those kind of issues, looking at interrogating the issues around inclusivity, sustainability, and livability. How do we strike the balance? And we're hoping that at the end of it, we might be able to come up with a model. So without wasting much of his time, I think someone will come on board and give you a brief presentation. I will be sharing my website for the search so you can see what we're all doing. But I just thought I can end it here. Sam, over to you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you very much for that introduction, Prof, and my supervisor. I thank all the organizers. Please, can you hear me? Can everyone hear me?
Yes,
we can, sir. Thanks.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. So my name is Medaishe Samuel. I'll be presenting on road transport infrastructure development, a metaphor for urban livability in Minna, Niger State. Minna, Niger State happens to be one of my study area for my PhD work. Okay. Now I've structured this work in two different parts. The first part is to actually lay a foundation, linking the different aspects, as my supervisor has said earlier: sustainability in terms of infrastructure, urban livability, and then inclusive infrastructure development. These three ideas put together side by side. One basic question I want to ask, I always ask myself is, if a city is sustainable, does that translate into livability? If the city is livable, does it include everyone? These are basic questions that often agitate my mind. And that's actually the line of my PhD research. So this work here now, I'll be looking at the background of sustainable urban infrastructure, urban livability, inclusive infrastructure development. I'll emphasize more on urban livability. I'll take you through the dimensions of urban livability. I'll show you some of the indicators that have been developed for urban livability and some of the measuring tools for urban livability. Having laid that foundation in literature, in theory, then I'll be able to problematize urban livability within the space, one of the spaces, which happens to be my lab for the PhD research. That is Minna in Niger State. I'll be looking at the description of Minna in terms of population, the maps, the coordinates, the history, and all other, the significance of the city of Minna to the Nigerian, in the Nigerian context, sorry. Now I'll do a description of urban livability efforts in terms of road transport infrastructure in Minna. Then I'll show you some of the current challenges in terms of transport livability within Minna. So here we go. Now, in laying the background, sustainability, livability, and inclusion must take care of this element. It must take care of education and awareness. It must take care of biodiversity conservation. It must take care of competitiveness of the city. Inclusion must be effectively taken care of. Inclusion must be taken care of. Security must be prioritized. Healthcare must be considered. Air quality must be looked at. Recreation and tourism is a very serious matter. Transit-oriented development, all this must be put together in one basket for us to be able to have a balance between sustainability, livability, and inclusion in terms of infrastructure. Now, here we go. My description of urban livability. Urban livability basically looks at optimizing the performance and the integrity of human life. That is as described by Ellis and Roberts in 2016. Livable environments integrate physical, social well-being parameters to sustain a productive and meaningful human existence. Another description is that productive in the sense that social clustering of humans yields considerably more than total of individual productivity. Meaningful in the sense that humans need, by their very nature, to participate in forming successful and self-sustaining social systems. All these are laying the foundation for urban livability. Now, relevant to this study is the characterization of urban livability as human behavioral function that denotes the interaction between individuals and environment. That is as described by Passione in 1990. The sense of urban livability is a uniqueness and strong ties to urbanity. Historians, urban analysts, and planners have used the terms urbanity and urbanism interchangeably to denote the culture or way of life of city dwellers. Now, I'm going to look at the dimensions of urban livability. We have two dimensions of urban livability, actually. We have looking at urban livability from the design point of view and looking at it from the planning point of view. Now, let's say, if we are considering urban livability from the design point of view, one of the prevalent views regarding urban livability is concerned with the aesthetics, that is the beauty, physical characteristics of buildings, streets, and development blocks. Urban livability is perceived as a creative design process to produce timeless physical models and themes with economic and social functions. Which identify path, node, landmark, edge, district, and building typologies that affected and potentially improved the daily lives of people, his own definition. Jane Jacobs, in The Death and Life of the American Cities, advanced a set of urban design guidelines for maintaining the quality of life in the city. He proposed fine-grained grid iron urban blocks, high densities, and mix of residential and commercial uses. All this he expects to improve the livability within the city space. Now, when we look at it from the planning perspective, the planning perspective for urban livability is looking at the technical and the functional aspect of urbanity. As is the second view now, the technical and the functional aspect. It is not just enough to put building blocks together. It is not just enough to put buildings, landscape, and all of this together. How functional are this landscape? How are they able to connect efficiently? How do we have harmony within the city? That is the planning perspective to this urban livability question. This approach accompanies the development of modernity and generally emerges from comprehensive and system planning theories. This as opined by Alexandra in the year 1992 and 2000. The system theory approach views the city as a collection of distinct social and economic components that can be physically segregated to optimize the performance and activities within each of the components. Furthermore, perfecting vehicular traffic, as I earlier told you, reducing the externalities that emerge from proximity of incompatible uses. That means different functions within the city must be positioned in such a way that they don't conflict in terms of use. So having this put together is what ensures livability within the city space. Now, from here, I'll take you through a little of some of the measuring tools and indicators for urban livability. Talking about the tools, first let me describe here livable cities. Livable cities were popularized actually in the 1980s in connection with growing environmental concerns and the increasing competition among world cities to attract foreign investments and boost their economies. So the issue of livability actually started as a result of the need for competitiveness within the different cities of the world. Now, despite the wide-ranging and relatively subjective interpretations of urban livability, numerous indices and measurement tools were developed over the last 3 decades to rank cities according to amenities and opportunities afforded to their residents and visitors. Some of the measuring indicators are safety, security, crime, climate, transport, and all the rest. All these make up the indicators that you can use to measure the urban livability within the city space. Now, we have the issue of ranking. If you have all these indicators, how then do you rank livability? Different institutions have come up with different ranking for urban livability. We have the ranking by the Economist Intelligence Unit in 2013. We have that by MASA, Quality of Living Survey. We have the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. We have the Better Life also. All this talking about how to measure urban livability. Now, the Economist Intelligence Unit ranked urban livability in 4 broad perspectives. They looked at it from the idea of healthcare. How do we give affordable quality healthcare to the people, medical services, including availability of off-the-counter drugs? That is one broad perspective of the measurement. Then another perspective is the culture and environment. The culture and environment is another unit for his measurement of urban livability. They looked at, under this, they look at the climate, they look at air quality, they look at traveler satisfaction, they look at the issue of corruption, they look at the issue of recreation, and etc. Then the next one he talked about education. Provision of affordable and quality education, both at public and private level, must be ensured within the city space. Then the last but not the least is what is the infrastructure aspect of it. The infrastructure category includes various indicators that evaluate quality of local road networks, mass transit, regional and international connectivity. All this put together were the advancement made by the Economist Intelligence Unit for ranking cities in terms of livability. Then the next one, I look at the ranking of the city in terms of livability by MASA, which is tagged the MASA Quality of Life Survey. Here, quality of living is measured via 39 descriptors. These 39 descriptors are clustered into 10 classifications, which are socio-political environment. Socio-political environment, we look at the crime rate, we look at safety, we look at stability. Then we have the issue of housing and natural environment. Here, we're seeing the interaction between the climate, natural calamities, and weather extremes. How do these factors, how do they relate with the human environment? Then we look at the markets, the issue of market, availability of goods and services within the market spaces. Another one is the utility, under which we have transport, we have the traffic component and other services. All these 10 make up the MASA Quality of Living Survey. And under this, a city is subjected, a city is appraised on the basis of these 10 components to rank them and see how livable such a city is. Then we have the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, then the Better Life Index. The organization was formed. The organization.
Sorry, Sam, 2 minutes, please.
Okay. Now, having laid that foundation, let me go into my study area, which is MENA. You can see from the map here, look, that is the map of Nigeria, which shows Niger State. MENA is the capital of Niger State. It is a city with an average city in Nigeria with a population of about 500,000 people at present, as estimated by the National Population Commission. It has about 28 neighborhoods presently. Now, looking at this kind of a city with such population, you would expect that this city would have grown in terms of infrastructure, road infrastructure. But unfortunately, this is not so. Unfortunately, this is not so. All major entry into the city is bedeviled by bad road networks. You can see this is one of the entry into the city, Pakungu Mina Bida Road, in a complete state of disrepair. You can't even imagine that there's no more asphalt on this road any longer. The major artery, it's collapsed already. Now, another issue with transport infrastructure is the continuous violation of traffic regulation by the resident. You can see a pedestrian bridge is provided, but hawkers crossing the road dangerously. This continues to breed problem within the city. You can see here, walkways are provided, but commercial activity taking over all the walkway. Vehicles moving haphazardly without any road markings. All this continue to affect the flow of traffic. The city, yes, making efforts to improve road infrastructure. However, this road infrastructure are not in tandem with inclusion. Now look at this. This is a night view of the city of Minna at night. No visibility, very poor visibility, which portend danger for residents of the city because the power supply is at very, very low level. Street lights are not functional. Then how will this city function very, very well? Now I have a simple view. This is one of the problems. You can see the chaos here. You can see the chaos within this area. This is a major road linking the federal capital of Nigeria to the city of Minna. And the road is in this form. This is another portion with this dangerous road system. And the problem continues here and there. So now, livability within this city is a very serious issue of concern. And I bring to conclusion. This presentation is an extract, mind you, of a part of my PhD work. So the work is ongoing. Data collection is going to commence very soon as ethical clearance is given. So I leave you at this point for on this presentation. Thank you very much.
Prof. Hope, Sam, thank you very much. The focus of your work, Sam, I think resonates with many people on this webinar this afternoon. The tension between livability and sustainability and inclusivity is extremely real, especially in the African context. And I look forward to engaging with you and Prof. Hope on the topic once we've had all of the presentations. So next up actually is myself. I didn't introduce myself at the start. My name is Anel du Plessis. I'm the research chair in cities, law and environmental sustainability. It's a SARCI chair and it's based at the Northwest University's Potchefstroom campus. I'm going to do a share screen. Sam, can I ask that you just stop screen sharing from your side?
Yeah, done that.
There we go, thanks. So I really only have 5 minutes, and you saw that I was quite strict with Sam, so I'm definitely going to keep to my 5 minutes. That is if I can manage to handle my PowerPoint, which seems to be stuck. All right, I'm just going to, there we go. So a brief introduction to the chair. As I've indicated, based at Northwest University, it came into existence the beginning of last year. It comprises of myself, postdoctoral fellows from other parts of the country, not other parts of the world, I should say, and other parts of Africa, PhD students, master students, and final year LLB students. So as our name suggests, we focus on cities, which really for us are urban areas in the widest sense of the word, and how the law as a notion, as well as the law in the sense of being a regulatory framework, applies to cities as governors, as well as cities being governed by an international and national legal and policy framework. And our real focus is on environmental sustainability, understanding how the law should help us in moving towards urban sustainability from an environmental perspective. I think all of us on this call this afternoon are pretty aware of how cities and urban development is hampering and negatively affecting the natural environment. But we also fully understand how important for the kind of development that we need in Africa, the balance between financial, environmental, and social sustainability is. Our research really focuses on conceptual issues. That's the first line of our work, where we typically try and understand the tension between environmental rights and the SDGs, for example. Some of the students look at new notions, such as, for example, the place of cities in global environmental governance, systems governance. Other students look into difficult questions around the role and place of children participation in cities. Many of the students work on aspects of climate change governance in the city space. Others look at the tension between financial sustainability, issues of corruption, how it impacts the pursuit of environmental sustainability in the South African context. So you can hear that there's a wide range of specific issues all feeding into the nexus between the law, environmental sustainability, and urban development. We envisage to have 3 types of impacts over the next 5 years, or the 3.5 years remaining. Improved local environmental governance in South African cities. I think that's one of the chief outcomes we hope to achieve, to have our research feeding into how our metros, districts, and local municipalities govern in and for the natural environment. We do hope to establish long-term collaborations for scientific and policy impact, for example, through science engagement, but obviously also through our published research. We look at working together closer with institutions within government, definitely also NGOs, other tertiary institutions, some of which are chairs, and also then researchers abroad, where we find that there's a keen interest also in understanding how SDG 11, for example, is going to play out in the African and South African context over the next few years. And then lastly, but definitely not least, is the training and retaining of bright emerging researchers and future academics. The SARCI chairs, for one, is a cohort of chairs that's responsible for ensuring research capacity building. And I think the session that we have today is definitely feeding also into that, where we create a platform for at least 3 PhD students to share their research. If you are interested in knowing more about what we do at CLES, the kind of activities that we busy ourselves with, the publications that we work on, and those that have appeared in journals, the popular media, etc., you are welcome to visit our website, where you will also be able to download our regular newsletters. And here you can see our contact details. You can see the existing team at CLES. And also up here, let me just see exactly where. You can see Nicolene, top right. Nicolene Stein is also the PhD student that will be presenting on behalf of the CLES chair this afternoon. As you will soon hear, Nicolene is extremely interested in the nexus between innovation, technology, and the law. She's also done her master's in this area, and a doctoral study, as you will soon be able to tell, is looking into a topic that's extremely important for South Africa as a water resource country, a country where many cities, not only Cape Town and PE, are facing droughts and water shortages in the future. And so, Nicolene, without further ado, I'm handing over to you to tell us how technology might just be able to help us save ourselves from water scarcity in future. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Prof, for the introduction. And thank you so much for the opportunity to present here today. So yeah, I will get right to it. My PhD investigates the realization of the constitutional water rights in South African cities through intelligent water management technologies. So I definitely have a keen interest in law, technology, and innovation. But today I'm going to present on a particular aspect of my PhD study, namely the adequacy of the Water Services Act in addressing insufficient data in cities. Now, just briefly, for your convenience, this is the outline of my presentation. Yeah. So in South Africa, the Constitution guarantees everyone the right to have access to sufficient water, as we all may well know. Now, Schedule 4B of the Constitution explicitly provides that local governments are required to provide water and sanitation services to their communities. As such, local governments, interchangeably referred to as cities or municipalities in this presentation, are essential to the achievement of the constitutional water right given their water service delivery mandate. The reality is, however, that cities face various challenges in relation to their water service delivery function. Now, while I'm not able to go into specific details on these challenges today, I will mention that my PhD, in my PhD, I focus specifically on 4 challenges only, but today I will zone in on the insufficiency or lack of data in cities pertaining to the provision of water services and certain aspects thereto, and whether the law, in this instance, the Water Services Act, adequately addresses this challenge. Now, cities as highly complex systems with their domains increasingly being interconnected and their processes exceedingly dynamic, progressively require sophisticated data to realize their ability to respond adequately to the challenges of service delivery, especially in the age of sustainability and urbanization. Now, data are essential not only for the technological opportunities it presents, such as big data analytics and context-aware computing, but also for the prospect of increased knowledge. Now, data allows cities to understand where they fail and where they succeed in terms of service delivery. They enable them to determine where inequalities persist and for adequate and informed decision-making, amongst many other advantages. As the saying goes, what gets measured gets managed. Conversely, what does not get measured does not get managed effectively. Nevertheless, not everything that gets measured has value. So data needs to be of good quality and have integrity in order to be valuable. Now, while there is no universal agreement, data quality generally has 6 dimensions, namely completeness, uniqueness, timeliness, validity, accuracy, and consistency. Data integrity, on the other hand, is known as an uncompromising adherence to certain ethical values, the complete avoidance of deception and strict honesty, as well as the state of being complete and whole or entirely unimpaired. Now, considering these requirements in the ensuing discussion will be necessary to accurately determine whether cities have sufficient data regarding their water supply and services. Now, in terms of water services provision, we need a whole lot of data, but specifically, we need access to data on non-revenue water, including the physical, commercial, and authorized use aspects thereof, as well as on water losses, resource availability, water use, supply and demand, the status of water infrastructure, maintenance for sustainable water services, and finally, who has access to water and at what level of supply? Now, while for the sake of time, I will not read the quote from the National Water and Sanitation Plan on the screen here, but I feel that it is sufficient to say that specifically the master plan firmly states that inadequate data and information caused by weak monitoring infrastructure and systems pose significant risks to both planning and decision-making and should be addressed with great urgency. But what does the Water Services Act say in this regard? Well, this act is, of course, the principal act governing water services in the country, but what do they require of cities? Well, one of the main objectives of the Act, which we will briefly investigate, is to establish a national information system aimed at gathering data or information on water services and to distribute such information. The minister is the one who has to establish the national information system, and the public must have access thereto. Now, very importantly in this regard, the minister may require any province or water services institution or consumer to furnish information for the system. This thus includes water services authorities, namely municipalities, who are responsible for providing water services. Now, the Department of Water and Sanitation actually initiated two main developments to implement this legislative duty. Now, firstly is the National Integrated Water Information System, or Nevis. The Nevis, you will see here on the left-hand side of the screen, provides information products via dashboards. And specifically, the water services section on Nevis provides dashboards for access to water, supply and reliability, non-revenue water, water service development plans, and water services products. Then we have the National Water Services Knowledge System, or the NWSKS, which was actually implemented after the National Information System to replace it. And this you can see on the right-hand side of your screen. Now, the NWSKS hosts national, provincial, and local level information concerning a variety of themes, such as demography, access to basic services, based on access to water infrastructure, of course, and water services programs, water quality management, institutional effectiveness, water conservation and demand management, and so much more information is provided on the NWSKS. The problem, however, is that upon investigation, these databases are problematic and they have numerous flaws. For instance, the data on Nevis is not continuously updated, rather only once a year, so the data may be considered outdated. For instance, the Water Supply Reliability Dashboard aims to provide data on the functional access to basic water supply infrastructure, yet it is only updated once a year in April. Since the data is only updated yearly and there is no continuous monitoring system in place, it is conceded that it does not provide an accurate depiction of the state of functional water supply in the country. Secondly, the database only stipulates that the data is mainly sourced from national means, such as Statistics South Africa's censuses and their general household surveys. No mention is made of how exactly the information from cities are used and if they are at all required to provide any information. This is made evident by the database's inconsistent use of information regarding, for instance, the non-revenue water of cities. So upon using the NWSKS at random, I found that to provide data at a local level, on the city of Matlusana in the Northwest Province, the information that was provided on the themes is immensely inconsistent regarding specifically the date on which the data or information were recorded. In this instance, the only data provided from the current year, 2020, are that on the water quality management in this municipality. Themes such as water board related information and water demand management date back as far as 2014 and 2011 or 2012 respectively. Hence, the data is inconsistent, inaccurate, and lacks timeliness. The NWSKS also acknowledges that it used DWS estimates for providing data concerning non-revenue water, yet it does not provide the source of this data. The accuracy of these estimates then, and thus the integrity of the entire database, is questionable. So there's also a warning on the database that there is no express or implied warranty as to its accuracy, completeness, or suitability. There are many other examples, but these are really troublesome considering that this is an implementation of a national legislative duty. Now, this brings me to a difficult and often complex question, usually whether the law is adequate. But in this instance, we're asking, is the Water Services Act adequate in this regard? While I'm sure you will agree with me that there are many ways adequacy may be measured, and while it is quite a contentious term, there is one very direct way of determining the answer. Does the law make provision for the issue at hand? And if so, does it do so sufficiently? Now, without opening a can of worms, I can say the following about the specific duties prescribed in the Water Services Act regarding specifically addressing the lack of cities' data by mandating the establishment of a national system of information. Now, firstly, the National Information System has many benefits and it may aid cities in their decision makings, but cities really do not form a part or a central part of this process. Instead, they may or may not be requested information, which means that cities may be reluctant to make an effort to collect, analyze, and distribute data and information that they desperately need for decision making and planning. Secondly, the national information systems are not up to standard in that they do not guarantee the quality of the data provided. Without this assurance, the information may be interesting, but in practice, meaningless. Thirdly, the Water Services Act does not make adequate provision for the setting of guidelines and standards for the information collected. Thus, the data obtained and processed may lack both quality and integrity. And again, while it might be a beautiful show horse, it cannot compete in the race.
Nicolene, 2 minutes.
Thank you. So I would now like to make some conclusions and wrap up. So in my view, the law should be developed and cities must play their part in the collection, analysis, and distribution of data concerning water services provision, particularly since not doing so could adversely affect planning and decision-making in the city. So one way of doing this is developing guidelines and standards. These guidelines should require that every element of data quality should be fulfilled and that cities should see to the integrity of data. Then I also advocate for capacities and skills building and that it should take place in cities to ensure in-house talent who are able to see to the proper collection, analysis, and use of data. Finally, of course, I would encourage cities to adopt technologies that allow for the improved collection of data. Thank you very much for listening to my presentation, and I look forward to any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much for that presentation, Nicolene. Extremely interesting and important given the water situation across South Africa at the moment. Next up, we really go to the Eastern Cape. That is some distance from where I'm based at the moment. Prof. Mbanga, you and your students have been doing very interesting work for a number of years already. It's my pleasure to hand the mic over to you, and immediately after your introduction of the chair that you are chairing at NMU, I would like for Khululekani Ntakana to proceed with the last presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anel, and also good afternoon to colleagues and participants. Thanks for the opportunity to join the Urban Studies conversation. I will not be sharing the screen. I will allow Khululekani to do that at the appropriate time. I think mine is just to talk briefly about the chair itself and where the work that Khululekani, we call him Coles, fits into the research agenda of the chair. Very briefly, the chair is not necessarily a such a chair. It's a ministry endowed chair. Came out of a cooperative agreement between the university and the National Department of Human Settlements way back in 2012-13. But initially the chair was established to support the sector, the human settlement sector, on introducing academic programs in the field of human settlements. It's more of a transition from focusing on affordable housing to developing human settlements as a way of building cities. So the initial focus was on introducing those programs. But of course, at that time, there was an understanding that in so doing, as any academic programs would go, that should be supported by sound research. Some kind of research that seeks to respond to complex issues facing the human settlement sector in South Africa. In particular, the issues relating to how cities and municipalities respond to the flood tide of migrants that find their way into the urban areas in search of better opportunities, and how urbanization as such has influenced the type of the post-apartheid settlements we've seen in South Africa, or in a way has impacted on the ability of the affordable housing program to reverse the current special patterns we have seen inherited and also seen in the post-apartheid era in South Africa. So this chair is a bit complex in that sense, an education and a research chair. But today I'll be speaking very briefly on the education part, on the research component of the chair, because in 2016, some colleagues participated in an inaugural National Human Settlement Conference that we hosted at the university through this chair, under the theme of Sustainable Cities and Human Settlements Begin Today, which was more of a clarion call on all the researchers not to postpone the ideas or the thoughts to address issues today, because the temptation is always to think about sustainability as something to be attended to in the future. And yet the current decisions or decisions measure impact on the type of cities we want to see. So that was the theme. That conference led to an emergence of a number of threads and streams of research in the chair. It's an education and a research chair. But briefly on the research side, what came out from that since 2016 has been a focus on urban informality and sustainable urbanization. I think colleagues also participated in 2019 on the SASOF 2019 conference we hosted under the theme of sustainable urbanization. I'll share also the website links related to the work which happened from that international conference. So there's been that particular focus. Within that research focus, we are looking on issues of vulnerabilities and strategies of low-income settlements in dealing with the issues. Low-income settlements, including the coastal communities, as you would understand, the Eastern Cape borders, the Indian Ocean, 100 kilometers of stretch. And we've seen how those communities continue to struggle within the ocean's economic space, which means the benefits of the ocean seem to trump them from where they are. We look into those, but we look also into areas colleagues have already begun to raise of municipal service provision, be it water, energy, be it shelter, waste management. We look at it from the point of view of social, economic, and environmental sustainability in the research happening at postgraduate level and postgraduate level in the chair. We look into those. Quite interestingly, when we deal with waste, we don't look at it as trash, but we look into how that waste can be turned into a resource for low-income urban settlement, again, through proper waste management, waste recycling, and how that can be linked into catalyzing or stimulating local economic development, changing the waste speaker to an entrepreneur. We've been engaging in that work across with other colleagues in the university. We work in a more of a transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary approach when we engage communities in this type of work. Yet again, on issues of waste, we locate it broadly on the green development agenda also. And there is research work underway on what we conceived as a green village or a green settlement, which is likely to influence our curriculum moving forward. Because in the space of green village and green settlements, we are working with our Germany universities and partners and the two TVET colleges in the Eastern Cape, Port Elizabeth, and East Cape Midlands on modeling a settlement that espouses the principles of green village, looking on carbon neutral, climate resilient settlement and resource efficient in Canadian Sea right now with international funding. So we look into that broadly. Green landscaping also as a critical important of sustainability of low-income settlements, which are completely brown and not livable, as you may just see them as having evolved over time. Very briefly also, where I think calls fits in, we look also within the human settlements management model as a broader theme. We look on space management as part of the placemaking studies. We look on urban space production. That is the nexus between urban space as in built environments and sustainable development. We look at it closely, whether the kind of space of places we are creating in the post-apartheid era in an environment which is seen to new legislation understood to be progressive. What are the type of places and spaces we're creating in South Africa? And to what extent are those spaces sustainable? So we look into that. In case, again, our own actions, I'm saying our, as the researchers, as municipalities, as professionals, recreate what we seek, we continue to say is a challenge in South Africa. Within that, interestingly, because that's linked on the issue of land, we also therefore look on public space contestations, the nexus between public space and also local economic development and food production. That's basically the spaces and how in the overall, that type of research is influenced by urban policies, rules, and regulations. Very briefly, within the team,
Prof. Mbanga, sorry, 1 minute, please.
Thank you very much, Anel. We look into basically that broader theme, but within what we call a human settlement management model, looking on those different variables. But we do that through focused research, but also we do that through community engagement as a way of demonstration project. As I was indicating right now, the work in Canon Sea with international partners, the work we're doing currently in the Mandela Bay Stadium, the Green Hub, with the municipality and the communities, and the other work that we do also in Woma Township with other universities from Germany around waste management. I think Koos will therefore be speaking on one area of our focus on the urban space management and urban space production. He is a PhD candidate, as already indicated, and he's therefore focusing on this nexus between the built environments and sustainable development, but from the point of view of how we create and recreate spaces. Over to you, Koos. You can share your screen. Thank you very much, Anel and colleagues.
Thank you very much, Prof. My name is Kulegan Dagana, like Prof has mentioned. I'm a PhD candidate at Nelson Mandela University. So I am just going to present my short presentation. Let me just share my screen. Okay, where is my presentation? Okay, so my presentation, my PhD is on the urban space production and sustainable development, a case study of Waterfall City in Johannesburg, Gauteng. So I'm just going to be presenting on the inclusive urban space production, and I'll also talk about the theory and practice of urban space production and the international experience on how urban space is produced in other countries, look into South Africa as well in terms of urban space production. In my PhD, on the literature review, I have come up with the findings that there are these challenges that South African urban space is facing. There's inability of South African cities to manage space production for the inclusion of the urban poor in the mainstream urban development. There's also inability of South African cities to accommodate, guide, and control the emerging real estate development products that are resulting in segregation, social exclusion, and deprivation of public spaces. The literature also reveals that there is a lack of a model that will influence these emerging developments, the policies on these developments to attain the inclusive urban space production in an area's sustainable development. Looking into the problem itself, starting by defining the urban space. It is a social outcome, the result of an historic process, an unequal accumulation of time, a presupposition and a milieu of social production. It is the manifestation of the earlier spatial patterns, and it presents the possibilities towards future events that are in the international urban rhetoric today. However, the distinguishing feature of urban space is the phenomenon of exclusion, as we all know, which causes deformity and disappearance of urban structure as a whole. The exclusion has become a permanent visual reality in our cities today, in which walled and gated communities divide the urban tissue and take up a large part of the urban space. So I have put in a picture here of the Waterfall City as an example of the urban space production, as a practice of urban space production currently. You can see that the space taken by the Waterfall City in Gauteng, it's 2,200 hectares of land. And this is just in Midrand in Johannesburg. It takes much of the space, and therefore it results in the road closures in the city. So just to check on the pictures that I've presented here, the road closures for all the gated communities, which then impact on the urban planning. The social action and struggle against the exclusionary process of globalization, such as the commodification and privatization of urban space, has always been in the international agenda, from the work of a French philosopher, Henri Lefebvre, who had a vision of the right to the city. So in Vancouver, the Declaration Habitat 1 conference in 1976, it was widely thought that the government attitudes towards human settlements would change, particularly in terms of policy making, that is to combat the urban fragmentation. Urban fragmentation may be viewed in several variables, such as political, economic, social, and physical fragments, fiscal fragments, functional and cultural enclaves. Urban enclaves is viewed as having an immense impact on sustainability, influencing variables, mostly in residential developments. From the socio-economic perspective, gating, walling, security guards, and surveillance, and etc., prove to improve the evaluation of property. So in the literature, I have identified that in South Africa, there has been more than 300 roads that were closed since 1996 in the most affluent areas of Johannesburg due to the enclave urbanism. And in other countries as well, China, there's more than 80% of residential areas in Shanghai that are walled and gated. And I've also looked as well on the current pandemic outbreak that has exposed the stark realities of urban fragmentation. Homeless and low-paid workers, those who cannot work from home, and those who have basic health insurances, who do not have those basic health insurances, and those who live in neighborhoods where social distancing is not a possibility, are among the most economically disadvantaged and most exposed to the public health risk. So the coronavirus may also exacerbate social and class differences in the use and privatization of urban space. The reality about the virus is that it exposes ideologies and biopolitical practices of social control and discipline based on the production of space, hybrid warfare, internal and external disputes over capitalism, globalization, and societies. This is just the pictures of the homelessness and the informal settlements. So the inclusive urban space, this is a pro-poor approach this is a pro-poor approach that equally values and incorporates the contribution of all city stakeholders in addressing development issues, including the marginalized groups. It is a process that must entail equitable, sustainable, and inclusive urban planning and developments aimed at alleviating poverty and inequality, and eventually countering the formation of informal settlements. The preliminary findings, as identified from the literature, is that in China, in South Africa, firstly, in 2013, South Africa adopted an inclusionary housing from the US, which emerged in the US on 1970s, that uses the planning system to foster inclusive urban space production. Now, this policy was seen as enabling more socially integrated forms of affordable housing, and also responding to the inaccessibility of well-located affordable housing as property booms drove up housing costs in many cities. This approach to encouraging the private sector to contribute to the supply of affordable housing had both the social inclusion and value capture agendas. The challenges of this policy were that it has a limited effect in reducing income and ethnic segregation. It also has it's also ineffective in weak property market environments. So South Africa has tried in terms of addressing the space management, but they've done that through the introduction of inclusionary housing. In China, in 2016, they have issued an authoritative instruction that called for an end of gated communities. This derivative aimed at stopping the construction of new gated communities and gradually opening the existing ones to the public. But the question is, should government halt these developments like China has done, or should just guide and control such private developments, property developments, that so that property developers do not develop as they please? But so there are 5 challenges in terms of halting gated communities. Firstly, would be redesigning the urban setting. That is, this would be an onerous task the planners need to take on. For an example, I've put in there a drawing that indicates a gated community with the roads around it. Now, if the government decides to end these and open up these gates, it will be a challenge for urban planners to now try and integrate these roads within the development with the existing roads outside the development. Other issues as well that come with the ending of gated communities would be the urban governance. So the urban governance system will have to change towards more autonomy for individual communities, and also social friction that is now the mixing and integrating diverse subpopulation is likely to be a fraught process. Legal issues such as mandate infringes on residents' property rights. So that is such a mandate. If we end gated communities, it will infringe on residents' property rights. The cost of roads and other shared spaces are factored into the prices of their homes. It won't be easy for them to allow government to open up gates and open up or demolish the walls. And also there's financial burden that goes with it. Now, this would be an extremely expensive and lengthy process in terms of demolishing the walls or dismantling the fences of gated communities. That would be imposed on government as well. However, also the human rights.
Sorry,
Yes.
2 minutes, please.
All right, thank you. The Human Rights Commission in South Africa supports the halting of these gated communities, yet the government has not taken any initiative to address that because they believe that it infringed the human rights. So what I've identified as a gap in this study is that even though there has been studies done or conducted in this area, but no study had evaluated the impact of exclusive capitalist urban space production and area sustainability, and ultimately produce a model that will influence policies to accommodate, control, and guide the enclave urbanism. Also, there is no national policy for gated communities in South Africa. There needs to be a responsive model informed by transdisciplinary knowledge to influence and foster the crafting of proactive policies. Thank you very much. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Kulekani, for that disturbing presentation, I should say, but also definitely a study that we look forward to seeing it in print. So ladies and gentlemen, all of our participants, I'm inviting you to please post questions in the chat. I thought initially that you would be able to pose it verbally, but on my side, it seems as if you do not have mics that I can mute or unmute. So please use the chat line. I would like to plead for direct questions. We only have 15 minutes for question and answer time. So short questions to the point. And I'm going to ask our panelists to also keep the answers straight and to the point. So I've already received 3 questions from Rufiwa Raidani. It was by email. The first of which is, what can local government do to make the city, the built environment and surrounds comply to environmental sustainability? So I imagine that that means comply with environmental law in order to achieve environmental sustainability. I wonder, Nicolene, whether you perhaps have a response to that, being the lawyer in the room. So the question is, how can we see to it that cities better help enforce legislation aimed at environmental sustainability? Just unmute, Nicolene.
Hi. Okay, so that is a very complex question I did not expect. So in terms of how cities could better enforce these legislation, I honestly think it comes down to not creating more policies and more plans, etc., but really focusing on the implementation and creating new ways of ensuring that implementation takes place. And I honestly think that this is where innovation comes into play. And of course, I could elaborate on that further, but honestly, when it comes to enforcement, I just think that we should start focusing on improving measures of implementation. And that is the long and the short of it.
Thank you very much, Nicolene. We've got a question for you, Sam. I'm reading it. Do you think that there's possibly some complexity or nuance in the understanding or definition of livability in different contexts? An extremely relevant question. And does an inclusive approach require us to ask questions about things such as values, images that we may otherwise treat as being universal? But could that in fact be obscuring a range of, and I will complete the sentence just now. I can't, I'm stuck again. So Sam, could you please respond to the first part of that question, and I will come back with the second part after.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. The description of livability, for me, I think is context-based, is space-based, actually, because what is actually a livable space in South Africa might not be considered to be a livable space in Nigeria. What is considered a livable space in Nigeria might be horribly perceived in another crime. So basically, livability is space-based in terms of its definition. So location is very, very key. The people are very, very important factors when you are addressing the context of urban livability. And this particular question is actually pointing to where I think my research is going. Having to achieve a nexus between livability, sustainability, and inclusion within the African setting. Because we have discovered that over time, there has been an overlap of what livability is in Europe, in America, and we enforce it on Africa. So can we now have a definition of livability, inclusion, and sustainability within the African setting, which is peculiar to us as Africans? That is one major focus of my research. And I hope at the end of the day, maybe like Wakanage and Rees in 1987, myself and my supervisor will be able to come up with a model, a paradigm shift from sustainability, livability, and inclusion into some other realm, which will balance, which will create a balance between these three models and concepts in the nearest future. Thank you very much.
Sam, I'm going to abuse my position here behind the mic to just latch onto that question. It was posed by Geshe Karuri Sabina, by the way, asking whether in Africa you deem us having the same understanding of livability, and even in a single country, be it Nigeria or South Africa. Don't you think issues such as the divide between the rich and the poor, and expectations in terms of the affluent and those living in abject poverty differ when it gets to understanding and enjoying livability?
Yeah, obviously that's why I say it is location based. It has to do with the people you are dealing with. My definition of livability can be within my maybe resources, available resources to me, which might not tally with your own definition of livability. A place you consider to be livable might not be livable to another person. So it is actually a subjective concept in terms of describing it. So it depends on individuals, actually. But at the end of the day, there are certain underlying continuities that must be established. Quality of life must be ensured. No matter where you are defining from, quality of life must be ensured. The community, there must be livable spaces. You must be able to make places. These are concrete indicators that we look at in livability. However, distilling it down now will now depend on the extent of resources available to different people, will determine the level of livability that you enjoy.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Sam. Appreciate that answer. We've got a hand raised by Haley. Haley, the organizers indicated that they will give you speaking rights. So if you like, we will enable your mic and you are welcome to then pose your question. You've been enabled, so you can pose your question. Just be clear to which panelist you are directing your question.
Apologies, Chair. I must have raised my hand by mistake. I'm not sure how that happened. So please accept my apology. I withdraw my hand.
Haley, anything that you would like to ask now that you have speaking rights?
Well, I represent the Department of Human Settlements. So everything that was said was so relevant to what we do at Human Settlements and our contribution that we want to make to the country in terms of developing sustainable and livable human settlements. So I have such a lot to say, but I know the time is limited, but just in general for us, it's such a huge ambition that we as a country in the housing sector have, that we are also excited and motivated to work together. And that's what I've my takeaway from listening to everybody talking is that it's a huge challenge, and it's something that we all obviously dedicated to work towards. And it's such a privilege for me to be part of these discussions and to listen and to and there's such a lot of knowledge and exchange that is really motivating me to take all of this knowledge back to the department and share with my colleagues in the planning unit and myself in the policy unit, and to just share everything that I've listened to and learned today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Hayley. I think what you are saying also underscores the importance of the work being done in these research chairs. And I think I speak on behalf of all three of us and even the others that exist in the country that we should take our job serious, and that we hope that over time we will be able to make a constructive difference. We've got a hand raised by Pedro. If Pedro's mic can please also be enabled from the organizer's side, I will appreciate. And Felix had his hand on for a very long time. So can I also just ask that Felix mic is enabled? Pedro, you are welcome to proceed.
Thank you very much, Prof, and good afternoon to everyone and the speakers as well. I'm Pedro Mzileni from the Department of Sociology at Mandela University in PE. And I have just three statements quickly. Firstly, I apologize that I don't remember the name of the presenter who spoke extensively about a lack of data either in the local government, but it was a presentation about something that had to do with water. From where I'm seated, I come from a background where a lack of data is not viewed as a challenge, but rather it is viewed as an opportunity, you know. So if indeed there is a lack of data, then that is an opportunity to formulate and craft alternative methodological pathways of studying the emerging questions of water when it comes to the sphere of government, you know. And also a developmental opportunity as well, where you could rope in promising undergraduate and also postgraduate students to commission an institutional census that could be done from the level of the university to generate that kind of data, you know, and that would put that kind of an effort as the primary contributor of knowledge in that kind of a space field of knowledge, you know. So for me, lack of data is not necessarily a challenge, but it's rather an opportunity to craft new pathways that were not previously imagined. And then the second comment is to my brother.
Pedro, sorry, just keep it quick. We've got 5 minutes left, and I would like for Nicolene to also respond to that remark. Thanks.
Yeah, just two quick comments, Chair. It's a pity that we were not allowed to engage earlier on. Two comments, just two. My brother from Nigeria. You see, with the whole notion of you know, urban livability, right? From the context of Nigeria. Also as well, I don't want you to localize your study. You know, the whole notion of context has been abused a lot in the research enterprise to make research in Africa become local, and then research done from, you know, from European modernity become universal, you know, whereas you can be universal from whatever position that you are located in. So don't deficit your study in that manner. But the comment is, the city itself, the whole model of a city, as a host of capitalism, in its nature, it generates value from being exclusive and being unequal, right? So the more the city is exclusive, the more it is unequal, the better the value it generates from those who own the means of production and reside in that particular city, right? Otherwise, the whole notion of property value would not exist in an environment of equality. It would not. The whole notion of property value, the tranquility of a city, belongs in the notion of inequality. So the city is a host, it belongs to inequality, right? So when you have that kind of a model, if you frame it like that, if you historicize and politicize the city from that reality, then you will begin to have a variety of...
Pedro, please wrap up.
Okay, let me wrap up, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Pedro. I'm going to ask that Nicolene and Sam briefly respond. Nicolene, you can proceed.
Hi, thank you so much for your comments and also a question. I do agree with you that yes, this can be interpreted as an opportunity, but we must first look at the current state of affairs and currently data and the insufficiency thereof, and also if you delineate the meaning of insufficiency in terms of data quality and data integrity, it can still be observed as a challenge. And given how essential water is for lives and livelihoods and the duties that we have in terms of SDG 6 to provide water to communities on an urgent basis, I really think that data plays an essential role in this, and that cannot be dismissed. And the current approach that we have to it, that is where the problem and the challenge lies. But I do agree that in solving this challenge, that's where the opportunity lies. So I think it's a line that we need to draw to say that, yes, there's opportunity, but we cannot dismiss the challenge thereof. Otherwise, we're just going to continue on the current path that we are on. And I do not think that that is sustainable. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicolene. Sam?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pedro, for the counsel about livability, not localizing the research. But mind you, what we are trying to do is not to make the research local. What we are trying to do is to make use, to take advantage of the uniqueness of African setting, to evolve indicators for livability. We don't want a situation where we continue to impose external indicators, which are probably, because if you look at the livability ranking on a yearly basis, you will discover that most African countries are lowly rated. In fact, the last ranking that I looked at, only maybe Cape Town and one other country, city in Africa was actually ranked about 85 and all of that. So that means there's something actually missing in that ranking, which is not peculiar to the African setting. So what we want is a ranking that takes advantage of the opportunities within the African setting to rank our cities, not ranking them on the basis of the bias ranking of Europe and other parts of the world. That is my idea of livability. It is not to make the research local. It is to take note of the peculiarities of the African setting to do the ranking. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Sam. I've got one question for you, Kululekani. Before we are going to wrap up, please allow me 2 more minutes. I would like to know, you are focusing on Waterfall City, and I find your city to be your study to be extremely interesting. What's the possibility of extrapolating your findings to elsewhere in the country, or do you think there's a scientific risk at doing that?
Thank you very much, Anel. Well, yes, it has been researched further in other countries, like I was saying in China as well, that there is a possibility of demolishing the walls, opening up the gates to the public, but there's a study that was done which also indicated that, I mean, the residents in the gated communities are completely against that, because they have a view that if government wants equality in terms of gated communities, government should just buy some of these gated communities and then subsidize it to the community, rather than to say, let's open up gates for everyone in a city. But yes, there is some of them who obviously think that, you know, we should learn to coexist, the elite with the poor. So it's actually better to open up the gates to the public.
Thank you, Kululekani, and I am afraid, and I'm sure you will agree, that for some people, having gates translates into livability now, just linking up to what Samuel presented. So it shows that the problems are complex. It's certainly not easy, and that's why we need passionate junior or emerging researchers like yourself working on these themes. And I'm sure that all of the participants this afternoon will agree that even though what's happening in our cities are sometimes making us feeling a bit disheartened, we can feel very much encouraged by the passion that we see among young people researching these difficult questions. And I think on behalf of the organizers, it's my duty and it's also my privilege to thank everyone who participated this afternoon. Thank you for having listened to all of the presentations. At the same time, I would like to thank our panelists, the chairs present, the students present, and I hope that you will participate in the remainder of the Urban Festival, and especially to the students, best of luck with pursuing those graduation ceremonies and eventually becoming doctors and scholars, very much experts in the area of urban governance and development in the African and South African contexts. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon and hope to see you at a few other events of the Urban Festival. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very much.
Thank you very much.